every one of us is born with a certain pureness. A lightness, one might say. For many of us, this light remains intact, burning brightly throughout our lives. But for some, the hardships of life blow it out. Addiction is unfortunately a topic that is near and dear to my heart. My mom grew up with a father who struggled, and still to this day struggles with extreme alcoholism. A little bit closer to home, my oldest sister Cassidy fell into her own addiction. I was witness to all the ways it tore her and our family down. Today, I hope to highlight the negative effects of addiction while also humanizing the disease. Today, I will tell you what addiction is, my experience with two people struggling with this disease, and give a new perspective on how we view addiction and the possibility of recovery. As I was saying, we all have this lightness inside of us when we're born. Under the right conditions, this light can be nurtured into an undying flame of passion or creativity. But sometimes life gets hard, and it's in our very nature as human beings to do everything in our power to feel okay. For some, this can come in healthy coping mechanisms, such as expressing themselves creatively, like Cassidy once did. But sometimes this isn't enough, and people turn to unhealthy coping mechanisms such as substances like drugs and alcohol. Maybe it starts out as a Friday night thing to wind down from a long week of school or work. But it's when those Fridays trickle into Saturdays and Sundays and begin to flow throughout the week when it might be a problem. The CDC classifies this problem as addiction, defining it as a chronic but treatable medical disease. I'd like to reiterate that it's a medical disease, one that affects 60 million people in America alone. That is 1 in 5 individuals, or about 5 of you here today. Now that I've given you a basic understanding of what addiction is, I'd like to introduce to you two people whose experience with addiction contradicts everything that I thought I once knew. First, there's Al. Some may call him my grandpa, but to me, he's just my mother's father. No less, and definitely no more. He's the type of guy you think of when people bring up hard-hitting terms such as deadbeat or addict. His addiction to alcohol has been prevalent ever since my mom was a little girl, and was something that I heard the effects of how it changed the course of my mother's life. I've heard just some of the atrocities he's committed against his own family while under the influence. I'll spare the details, but the mental and physical trauma and abuse that he put my mother, my uncles, and his wife through are absolutely unforgivable. To this day, the lasting effects of his addiction can still be found strewn messily throughout my family. And in all honesty, he is somebody that I look at as less than human because of his disease. But then there's Cassie, my oldest sister. Words can't even begin to describe her unapologetic authenticity and creativity. She was the first person I looked up to in life, besides my mom, of course, and she was also the first person to introduce me to art, kickstarting my own journey of creativity at a young age. She taught me how to advocate for my needs, to always be kind, but she also taught me what heartbreak felt like. Now, I invite you to sit with that for a moment. Notice how different the language was around these two people, although they suffer from the same disease. Cassidy's addiction began in her early teen years, and it was something I saw manifest as we both grew older. Because of her addiction, Cassidy has endured years of abusive relationships filled with countless instances of domestic violence and dozens of phone calls to the police. And unfortunately, all too common occurrence for those suffering with addiction. According to the Addiction Center, 80% of domestic violence cases are related to drug use. 80%. That is a statistically astonishing number. Cassidy's addiction, just like Al's, disrupted my family, but it also disrupted my view on addiction. How is it that I could reduce Al down to just his disease while holding Cassidy on such a high pedestal? The truth is complex, and it's not something that I completely understand myself. But here's a couple things I've learned about addiction along the way. First, in the wise words of Dr. Gabor Mate, a renowned addiction specialist who held his own TED Talk in 2017. If you want to understand addiction, you cannot look at what's wrong with the addiction, you must look at what's right with it. So now I pose a question. What does addiction provide? And you might be like, Claire, what a stupid question. It's addiction. But it's a genuine question with a genuine answer. And it's that it eases the pain. It provides a sense of comfort, peace, and control, even if these feelings are ever so temporary. Second, addiction is not a moral flaw. People are not bad people simply for how they choose to ease their pain. Now, it might be hard to separate that fact with the fact that addiction causes ugly choices that may make somebody a bad person, but that's where the moral flaw lies, not in the addiction itself. Addiction comes with a lot of bad, but now I would like to remind you of the possibility of recovery, the possibility of remembering the light. Recovery from an addiction of any kind is an extremely difficult journey, but it is a journey that is not only possible, but worth taking. I would love to stand up here today and tell you the fairy tale ending to my sister's story. But the truth is that healing is not linear. It has its highs, and unfortunately, it has its lows. As a loved one watching from an outside perspective, the best that you can do is hope that one day the highs outweigh the lows, that they'll be okay. Recently, I was given a piece of advice from Mr. Nielsen, and he said, you have to love them where they're at. Now, I know that this is easier said than done, but it is truly beautiful advice. With the right resources and support, recovery is possible. Today, I explained the complexities of addiction. It is a highly individualized disease that we must approach with an open mind and full heart. Cassidy and Al are two very different people, but they share a parallel struggle. And it is my hope that one day they share the parallel triumph of recovery. So, if there's one thing that you take from the speech here today, I hope it's that you remember the light.